What's up, rock stars? What is going on? Welcome to Rocket Live. My name is Chris Vaglio, and I appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out with me today live. And thank you to everybody that's going to watch the replay of this or listen to it on the audio feed when that gets dropped. Today, I have a really awesome guest in the Rocket Virtual Studio today. Super excited to have my friend, my colleague, Bridget Esposito on the show today. But before we bring her on, have to do some quick housekeeping up front, and we want to thank our official sponsor of a Rocket Live, and that is Win Local. And let me tell you about Win Local and the share card. This has changed the way I do networking. This is a contactless way to share your contact information via SMS, QR code, NFC tags, and web. So if you're like me and you still use paper business cards, this is another great way for those people that are not using paper business cards anymore. And let me tell you, I've been at a bunch of networking events, and there's a lot of people that don't use cards anymore. So this is a great way to do that, to share your information contactless and no more fumbling with trying to type things in or anything at all. It all gets there. All your links are in one place, because if you're like me, you have more than one link going on. So make sure you check out Win Local right now and get your share card. Use the code, my very special code. That's it right there, right below here. And it's in the links and in the show notes. Support my sponsor, Win Local. Sign up at winlocal.com and use my promo code ROCKET10 to get an additional 10% off your subscription. Do it now. Don't delay, and support my sponsors. So with that, now that all that's out of the way, I want to bring my guest on. There she is. Bridget Esposito. How are you? Thank you for coming on.
Good. This is so exciting. I love it. I'm ready to be here.
Yes. No, I'm so happy to have you on here. And I think we started talking about trying to get you on back last fall or something like that. And we were like, got to get you on the show. We got to get you on the show. It's been forever. So I'm so glad we're finally able to make it happen. And this is great. We have so much good things. I feel like I have a great list of things to talk to you about. We did a lot of good pre-gaming behind the scenes. That was cool.
We did. I don't think we're going to run out of things to talk about.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. So as we get into the conversation today, feel free to comment or ask questions as we go. And of course, if you're watching this live, you're watching the replay of this, please make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you're watching this. So that way you get notified every single time we go live or drop a new video. Also, same thing goes for the audio feed. So wherever you're listening to us, wherever you get podcasts, please hit that follow or subscribe button. So that way you also get notified every time we drop a new episode. So Bridget Esposito, let's dive into it. VP, Creative Director, U.S. Market, Prudential. Such a great title. I love the sound of that. You are everywhere. I love it. You were just you just spoke at Adobe not too long ago, which was I saw that picture and you're up on stage and I'm like, yes, Bridget's up there. This is so great. So congratulations on that. That is awesome.
Thank you. I know. I feel like it's every, creative's dream to be on Adobe Max, right?
Oh my God.
It was it was a life-changing moment for me because it felt so good. And it was just so exciting to represent and just talk about how we can get a seat at the table as creatives and all those things. It was that was definitely one of the moments in your career where you're like, wow.
That is definitely a highlight. And, for all those listening, this isn't this just happened, by the way. So Bridget's got a great story. It's not like she just woke up one day and boom, she was creative director and speaking at Adobe Max. So she's had definitely a long, great journey to get her to this point. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about your background because, you're a creator. You do it professionally, but you're also, just a very creative person. You're also, into sports. So there's that whole background too. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So how far do you want to start back?
let's talk about what even got you when did you even realize you were creative or wanted to be creative or notice that you were being you had this expression to want to create. When did that start for you?
I feel like that part has always been there, whether I recognize it or not. That has always been there, and I think that a lot of times when we look at our childhoods and you look back at different things,
right?
You're just wow, you start to recognize wow, I didn't realize what I was doing in those moments. So there was different things happening, but I didn't have a typical art background, especially growing up. It was encouraged. I had a very artistic father's side. And then my mother's side is accounting, nursing, science, like the whole nine, right? So
It's
it was
good.
definitely like living in both worlds. But I had a really big sports background in that
Right.
space. And I never forget though, like when I really knew that I loved this so much, I was trying to get a summer job because I needed to make some money.
Mhm.
And there was this place called Photo Magic. And if any of you can remember the boardwalk
Oh,
in like
yes.
the 90s, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
place, right? So there it was. I was just like, I need this job. Like, what does that? That looks cool. I literally was like I was like superimposing people's faces. I take their photograph and then superimpose their face onto other people's bodies, right?
I
So
love those. Those are great.
yeah, yeah, the whole nine, right? And then I was also
Yeah.
like, on the beach, like taking the little those little things that you would look through, right? I was the
Yeah,
one
yeah.
around doing that stuff too.
Right.
And in those moments, I just thought I was living my best life, like not realizing how much joy it brought me
Yeah.
to be working on early stages of Photoshop in that space.
Right. Yeah. Back when Photoshop was like, it was it was so like it was probably
Right.
like I'm trying to think like it wasn't was floppy disk still like was that 90s or did we
Yeah.
are we
I
on
was
the
still,
CDs at that
no,
point? Because I
so
can't.
I don't think we didn't get to the CD phase till a little bit later, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So
So
it was still the disc, but multiple discs.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of that. And then I realized that I really was into it and I love the thought process. I also really early on recognized
Hmm.
I didn't like being put in a box and that I fought it a little bit. I was a little bit of a rebel. Like if you
Yeah.
told me that there was only one way to do thing, I was the one saying, well why? Like
Right.
I'm going to show you there's another way to do it. Which you can imagine in the early, like in the 90s, that was a little frowned upon, right? I was looked at like, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, it depends, it depends, but it's definitely that punk rock spirit, you just like, wait a
yeah,
second, I don't have to do it this way. There is another way of doing this, and
another
and
way of doing it.
I want to do it my way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so different now than when we think about like diversity of
Oh
thought
my
and
gosh.
how you like the way that we approach creative now is so different. And listen, I wouldn't change it for the world, but I love that we've moved into this new thought process, what that is.
Yeah.
So then I kind of moved into that space and I played Division I softball. And so leadership team, all of
Right.
that was like super important to me, like crux. And I think a lot of those lessons I was able to bring in to my career.
Hmm.
And then I remember going into college, I took an internship, one with a public relations agency and one with an advertising agency doing design.
Right.
And that's when I really knew I was like, oh, this is it. Like this design work. Although like the PR internship was paying extremely more than the design internship. I was like, no, it's okay. I don't need money. Forget that. I'll
Right.
do this. Um, and I was able to learn from a lot of great people. And I started off actually at a place called DKB and Partners in Morristown. That was like
Oh
my first.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. Like it was my first ad agency space, and I learned from amazing people in that space. And one of them, who I still work with today, Brian Hagan, who
Hmm.
literally just kind of set the standards of like this is how we operate. This is how you do. This is how don't be afraid to
Right.
do these things. So it was really great. Yes, that was my first gig, and then the
That's
economy kind
awesome.
of crashed, and I went back into coaching because college
Hmm.
coaching. So I went to go get my master's degree because they were paying for it. So I was like, all right, I'll
Right.
coach.
Why not?
Um, and I think why I bring that up is because there's so much importance between team and leaderships and all of those skills that kind of transcribed
Hmm.
about how I looked for working with a team and how I pushed to make sure that when I'm working someone, like how I hold them accountable, how we work
Right.
together, that there's no swim lane. Like I don't stay in my lane. I don't want you to stay in yours. Like we're doing this together. And really how to approach problems as what is it for the customer? Like what's the best interest and throwing egos aside.
Yeah.
So a lot of that and the accountability level and things of that nature, and that you're only as good as the person to the right or left of you. Like I took all of that stuff with me,
Hmm.
and I really believe that helped me flourish in the space and be able to become even a better creative because I was such a great teammate and that I was able to build a wonderful team around us and be the partner that people want to work with.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a key thing that you said there because when we talk about leadership, and we'll dive into a little bit of that more because that's eventually now the role that you've really moved into the last bunch of years. And so it's like one of those things like I think that as creators, right, I think it's great that you had that background, the blended of
Yeah.
coming from, even going all the way back to like, how you're raised with the, your parents being on both sides of the spectrum there, and then bringing that together. And obviously that, you grow up with that, and this is what makes you and helps shape you into who you are today. And I think those experiences are huge. And then on top of that, then, but like you're creative, but then you get into something like organized team sports, right? And you find a love and passion for that, and eventually come back to it and assume a leadership role in sports now, to be a
Yeah.
coach. And I think that's a great lesson to learn, I think, for most people who are creatives out there, because I think the idea that, most creatives kind of hide in their hobbit holes, and they're just like creating, and they're the delicate geniuses and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But I feel like that's sort of like the myth, or what people paint a picture as a creative professional. And
Yeah.
listen, not everybody is like outgoing, and not everybody is so extroverted, but I think having those leadership foundations is really, really important for anybody,
Yeah.
because like, how you've grown now and where you are now, like you and I were talking about it offline, like having those leadership, the foundations that by coaching the team, helps you to coach your team now.
Right.
You've
1000%.
assumed a leadership role where, if I was to ask you, 15 years ago, 18 years, 20 years ago, I would say, Bridget, would you see yourself leading a creative team at Prudential? And I guarantee your answer would be like, dude, I'm just trying to get by. Like
Just trying to get
but
by.
this is where like experience is so important that you go through in life, and how you tap into that and use it for where you are now presently. I do that all the time, things I did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, like I'm using that stuff now without even realizing I'm using it half the time.
Right. Right. And I think too, so many times people think that because you're not working on a design or a campaign, or you're not doing those things, that you're not being creative, but you are.
Right.
You're applying the exact same the problem solving skills that you are when you're trying to think of a new campaign or a new slogan, or you're working on logos. That same thing applies to other spaces.
Yeah.
And so you get creative in those other spaces. And so I was coaching Division I softball the same time I was getting my MFA.
Mm-hmm.
And I kid you not, I had a big argument with several of the professors, actually. I think they were trying to make me cry. I know they were, because that's like their jam, right?
Right.
I was
That's
like,
they're
this
trying
is
to
not the way to do things. You don't, what have you. But I remember explaining to them, because they were like, leave softball out of it. I was like, I won't, because the creativity of how I solve problems is being applied here just as
Right.
much as it's being applied to these other pieces that I'm creating.
Yeah.
And there is an art form to being able to take something, whether it's you're cooking a meal, whether you're running a team of athletes, or you're creating a project. There's an art form to taking a bunch of ingredients and figuring out how they work together, and then what's the best outcome for that. It's a skill set that can be applied anywhere, and I think people forget that, and they undermine it in different spaces. And so I did not cry in that one meeting, and I think I got my point across in that
Right.
space. But right, so it can be applied in many different ways.
It's so true. I love that you brought that up too, because it's oftentimes a thing that I think is forgotten about, how those things like softball for you,
Right.
you've been able to take that and apply that critical thinking, those leadership skills, all those, and apply it to the creative process, and how to
Right.
make that work. And I think that's a really key thing, for I think anybody out there who's watching or listening right now to take away from this, especially if you're, for some of the people that listen to the show or watch it, like I know some of them, you're early on in your creative careers or professional careers, whatever it is. You don't have to just be a creator. This isn't just aimed at creators, but I think that statement, carries a lot of weight in pretty much whatever it is you're doing. So well
Yeah,
said.
and I thanks. And I would also say too, when we think about leadership, because it also, in those situations, you figure out what kind of person and what kind of leader you are, and what kind of teammate you are. Right. So
Right.
for me, the way that I'm a teammate on the field is also the way I reflect as a teammate working in advertising, working in marketing, working as an art director, creative director. I'm one that doesn't like to have silos. I like to put everything out on the table. I like to make sure that we're all on the same page, or we're going to over communicate. And I don't like when you keep things close to the chest and then
Right.
do that big reveal. I actually would prefer to like openly be working together. and in that space. And I think also, like I said, like I don't like define swim lanes. It just doesn't work well in my space. Like I love to be able to say, let's dive into this. Let me push on this. You push on that. And the idea that a diversity of thought is there, right? That you don't have to be an art director to tell me that this idea is going to work better than this one, right? I can push on strategy in the right ways. You know, I can push on editorial, and my editorial partner can push on me. And I think that's what the good relationship is, because we're not telling each other to swim in their own lanes.
Right.
We're telling, you know, we're working on like, let's do this together. And when someone brings in that different angle of thought process, that's what you need. And then, by the way, showing small groups to get ideas if it's working or not. And I'm not talking you're going to show the world, like this is not, you know, agreeance on committee, but being able to say, hey, I'm going to show so-and-so over there because they're our target market, and I just want to see if this works.
Right.
And just, it's so funny. It's like, and it's not done, but can you give me your thoughts on this? And so there's a lot of those things that I learned as a teammate. And I also am a big accountability person. I 1,000% will hold you accountable, as I would you expect you to do for me.
Exactly. It goes both ways.
It goes both ways. You have to. That's like a key to success. I mean, I know, you know, Chris, you know John Renz very well. That is my partner in crime at Pru.
Yes.
And I kid you not, like we are very, very good. We have like an amazing partnership. And I think it's because we can say, let's go. Like you do this better. I'll do this better. And we're going to rock it together. So.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there was a lot of things you said there that are really crucial. And I think also too, you had said the statement that, you know, being a really good teammate, you know, is, you know, before you became a leader, like being a good teammate first, you know, is what shapes you into being a really good leader, you know, when that position happens, when the opportunity happens to do that. And because you know what it's like to be a really good, and it goes both ways. It's not a one-way street here, you know, like, yeah, you may be the coach, you may be leading things, but you know, you need the full team of everybody all together to all be successful together. And that's really, really important. And the accountability it goes both ways. You said something early on when we first started, and I want to dive into this a little bit just to hear your perspective on it, because you had said something about you know, getting a seat at the table, being a creative. And I think we discussed a bit of it. We started touching on it through what we were just saying, but I'd love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that and what your perspective of that means, you know, having a seat at the table, you know, as far as being a creator goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think creators in general, any creative, I think our position is absolutely evolved, right? So I don't think it's fair to say that we can be the same creative that we were 15 years ago, right? 10 years ago. The new creative is someone who is actively working as a partnership with the strategy team and in that space and talking to partners and getting that seat at the table. I think foremost, before this, it was very common where decisions would be made. They're going to do a campaign. They might do a trade show, and this is happening. And can someone call the creative director so we can get them on that, right? Like it was almost like a passed down thing.
Right.
And I think in the evolution of stuff, it's like that's not enough, because when we think holistically about what has to happen, we have to be at that table so we can bring our best selves of thought. Again, bring the diversity of thought, bring the best ideas that we have and other ways of thinking about it, right? Breaking down those silos. And I'm not just talking about me. I mean, it's good to have representation all around, but getting that seat at the table and being able to be in those initial conversations, you can have a lot of influence on the outcome, and that is so important. I think that has shifted, right? And gone are the days where we're like, just throw the creative brief over the shelf and we'll take care of it for you, right?
Right.
You want to be part. I know I personally and my partners, we like to be part of that exploration in the creative brief and help you build the brief so that we start from a really good place to begin with.
It's crucial.
Important. Yeah.
I like how you just said that too, about how you know, the role has evolved, right? And from where it was to where it is now, because I do think that where things have gone, you know, how things have evolved, especially over the last couple of years, right? Where, you know, I make the joke, and you could throw me into that, but you know, everybody has a podcast now. Everybody has a video channel now. You know, it's like, and And while, yeah, I think that's happened because, listen, people had a lot of time on their hands and they're looking for ways to express themselves, looking for ways to keep themselves busy, which to me is that's being creative. Like looking for a way to express yourself is being creative.
Yeah.
And I think what it's done now in a really positive way is I think it's reinforced the fact of how people have discovered their own creativity and also put an importance on how creativity can be used every day in what it is that you're doing, however that comes out. But
Yeah.
how to use tools like this or anything else, even
Yeah.
like a Canva or something like that, and how to be able to like use that to increase your business or be more productive or express yourself or communicate better, And so I like how this is sort of like over those last couple of years of like just forced people into this now and say, oh, wait, I do have this creative where I used to say, well, I'm not creative. But like, no, you are. You just never really used that muscle,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now you are,
Yeah.
and I feel like that now it's become like it makes you so much more valuable as an employee, as a leader, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, to be able to have that ability to say, I can create something and I can show you now like what I'm thinking to make, somebody like you really bring it to life. Like, okay, it's not just, it is a real collaboration process now, I feel.
Yeah. The democratization of creativity has been
Thank you. Yes.
amazing. Yes. And I would say too, it's interesting because on the flip side, on the one side, you have people who again always want to do these things but never had the tools to be able to create great stuff. Now there's tools everywhere, right? Like
Oh,
Canva, Creative Cloud Express, that's another one. There's like ton of like, yeah,
this is it.
yeah, it's on like it's so easy to create materials and infographics and social posts and everything else, which is wonderful. Now again, there still needs to be lessons learned on how to do that,
Of
right?
course. Of
Right.
course.
And that's kind of where the creatives come in. But when that
Correct.
everybody should be using those tools and exploring that and expressing themselves in that way. And then they might just need some help on how to do that. And I've been teaching a course. I used to teach at Seton Hall University. Now I'm at New Jersey City University. But
Mhm.
essentially it's design for non-designers, where
Okay.
we literally talk about the importance of design, how to get your message through the thousands of posts that are out there, how to
Right.
stand out, how to make sure that you are the one that someone is going to call when they look at 5 different things, to talk the language of design, to be able to work well with creatives, be able to write a creative brief. That's a really important one for everybody to learn. Up and
Very
down the
important.
place.
Very important. Yes.
Yes. So that's a good example of like now learning those tools and you become a really good asset to someone who might not be able to do all of the things. And the other side of that is there's a lot of creatives that are like, oh, they're taking my job, but they're not.
Right.
They're
Right.
actually not, because what they're doing is they're freeing up your time so that you can do the bigger stuff and then they can have that smaller stuff. And so it's easier for you to set up templates for them in these new spaces and say, go make your content. I'll check in on it if you'd like, which I prefer to do, but it does free you and your team
Right.
up. And I think people have to be okay and secure in that now I'm going to add value in this other way. And I have more time to add value because I'm not doing 7 banners for emails, or I'm
Yes.
not creating
Yeah.
like a small social post, So I think that helps, right? And then you can spend time on those more developed social posts that are more campaigns that need that more thought process behind it and need that thing, as opposed to like, you know, Happy Valentine's Day, right? Like
Right.
let them
Exactly.
send that one out,
Exactly.
and then you spend time on the ones that really do need to put that extra thought behind there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that's a really great point, and I think that's really cool too that you've been teaching. So that's awesome. That sounds
I
like a
know.
class I would like to take.
It's you can if you want. Come to New
I
Jersey
might.
City
I'm gonna sign
University.
up.
I teach. I do it also for some companies too, because I think that the brilliance of it, done for a couple companies now, and I
Mhm.
love that they've called me in, and I've had people say, thank you for coming and teaching us, because I'll senior leadership all the way down, right?
Right.
Because they understand the value of what it means to have really good creative at the forefront, to
Right.
think about design, to think about their messaging, to think about what they're putting out there. It's making an impact, it's making an impact their bottom line. And they just never knew how much, and they never knew how to articulate it. And so spending time with companies and doing that it really does help them. And then, so if you're a creative and you're working in whether you're working in a small, tiny, 15-person place, or you're working with thousands and thousands of employees, it's so important for you to advocate for the importance of design, what it looks like, how to apply it, and set up these things for people so that they can have success within your own business.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I you know what? That's awesome. So that is something then it's not just, going to Jersey City. Like this is something you could go to any company and
Yeah.
pretty much teach that kind of approach and process to, activities, business activities and how to, even at that line, that kind of thinking, that process driven thinking from the creative perspective, I think is huge. And I think there's a lot of companies that would benefit from that. From having that kind of content available to them. I
The
think
more
that's
the more you can break down that wall and you can show the value of what good creative can do, the more that they'll understand, embrace you, and start letting you in that seat at that table, right? So, if you find someone in work, and if anybody is a creative and they want to do this internally for their own places, like connect with me. I'll help you figure out what that looks like to present to them. But once you do that, you're setting that space. And then the other thing I would say is not only put together this presentation of how important creative is, but also you should really find a champion within your group and with the outside of your group. Now, I have to tell you, I've been very lucky. I love Prudential. The people there are wonderful. I've met so many different people in so many different aspects of the business that have become champions for creative.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we better call creative. They're going to really help us with this problem, right? Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, when are we getting the creative folks in here? Like, let's call them first. And hey, will you attend our meeting here and this? And that is like what you want. You want people to be your champion and talk about, wow, have you seen the work they're doing over there? So that's great. And the other thing I would say is you also need to make sure that you're showcasing your own work. I was always kind of, you and I touched on this a little bit. I've always been so humble and I'm like ego aside. So I've never wanted to be like, look at my stuff, right? But I realized that if you don't promote your team and yourself and your work, like who's going to do that? And I think that took me a long time to figure out. And like,
because I've never looked at that as, and you know what? Let me take that back. I agree. There was a time when I looked at it that way. It was a very long time ago, but I did look at it that way because I didn't want to come off as look at me. But as I've grown older, slightly more wiser, just a little bit more wiser, I've realized that that's not the case. And the thing that always my mindset is, listen, I've got knowledge and I've got ideas, things that I've learned along the way. There's experiences that I've had that are unique to me. And I am not doing my part in helping to serve the people in my community or my network by holding on to this. Right. And if I put it out there and it's in a meaningful, genuine, authentic way, where I'm not looking for sales from it. I'm just looking to share this information. And if this helps you along your journey with whatever you're doing, then great. And if you want to talk further about whatever hiring or whatever that is, then that's great. But my initial purpose is to really help and serve people first. And so I've realized that over time that by keeping this stuff inside and not sharing it, whatever it is, it's not good. It's not, I'm not helping to promote, when I think about how I've learned and how I've seen things, and I go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that filmmaker shared that piece of information. It just like tapped something into me. And now I was able to figure out this next thing that I wanted to create.
Absolutely.
Thank God they shared that, and now and that's how I put into perspective. Like, it's not look at me. It's like, hey, I've got this. And if you find this valuable, great. My job is done. And hopefully I've helped you with that. And that's how I view it.
There will, because the idea that you even help one person makes it worth it.
It really does. It really does. And that person, it's just because it's happened to me and I've always been grateful for that. And it's like, I need, my way of, that's giving back, that's the way of doing it.
And I think the more that you share, the more that you're sharing your work. And I mean, the more you share your work, the more you share what you know, the more you're trying to share that space.
That's right.
Honestly, it's going to help someone else.
Absolutely.
And I think too, like, you have to get over some stuff. It's going to help you in your career because obviously you've got to get comfortable sharing your work and it's going to get torn down and you just got to get used to that. Right.
That's part of anything. It's part of the job.
Literally part of what we do.
part of
It
life.
also prepares you for having children because they also tear down everything you do. But that's fine.
That's
for
fine.
another
You know what? There's no kids are great, no filter, and it's like, boy, they
Yeah.
could just
You're
get
like,
away with it because they're
wow,
kids. Yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
You know, thanks, kid.
You really know how
Yeah.
to cut to the bone.
So, but yeah, and I think too, like what for me, I had to really fight through, and we started talking about this, Chris. Like, I had to fight through some imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Because it would be like, oh, like you're about to talk about this. Like you don't have any warrant to talk about that. Like, where's your value there? Like I had like a bit of an imposter syndrome, and it took a while, and I still feel it times. Like I
We're
still feel it.
humans. That's gonna happen.
I still feel it. I feel it when it's like, oh, and then I think, but what I've done is I've just said, Bridget, just do it, let it out, say it. And I
Yeah.
think, that takes some courage. And so I think, in our world too, that
Yeah.
courage becomes a key factor in success, right?
It absolutely does because listen, we're in a world where we provide creative services, right? So creative services are subjective. Like we do our very best to interpret the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
information that we're given, the data and that, and bring it to life visually in a way, and that takes creative. And everybody's got their style, and
yeah.
you work on it, and then the moment of presenting that idea is big because they may not like it. No
Yeah, but
matter how much you love it, they may still not like it, whoever they are, the client,
yeah,
whoever and you have to be prepared for that because it's subjective.
right.
But that's when we just talked about the courage. Like it takes courage to do that, and you have to be prepared for that either way. And that's part of it. But that's with, whether it's creative or your whatever other service that you're in or you're providing, like it's gonna happen. You could be a chef and you make the meal and you're like, this is the best meal I've ever made. And I taste and I go, I don't know, this isn't that great. And they're
Yeah,
like, what do you mean it's not great? I don't know. I don't like the way it tastes. It's not for me. Like it's the same kind of thing. But like, should that chef quit doing what they're doing? I don't know.
yeah,
But like, should you quit doing like, no, it's just, hey, it's just part of what happens. And coming back to what you were saying about the courage part, it takes courage. And yeah, you feel a little, it stings a little, but you know what? You do get over it. It makes you, and it actually makes you better because then you say, well, what was the lesson learned from that?
that's right.
Why
That's a
didn't they like it?
that's a big one. And I think
You know?
what I've learned over years too is, and because I mentioned to you, right, I have a really
Right.
creative father side. My mother's side is like super analytical and
Right.
like, what do you mean you're not good at math, Bridget? Right? Like, why don't you want to be a doctor? Like, the whole nine, right? Like,
Right.
and I just to give you an insight, like my mother would like read my papers in from the Masters of Fine Arts, and she'd be like, where's the basis on this? What do you mean you feel like what is this
What
crap,
is this
Bridget? Like,
feeling stuff? This
what
is
is
like super
feelings and
airy.
stuff? But I think what I always got from that, right, was I would need to put in some analytical connections for her to like base it, right? Like,
Right.
okay, well, here's the state, here's those KPIs of what I'm trying to accomplish. Like, this is the stats. And I think that helped her. But so I learned that from there. But then the biggest thing of like, what's in it for me, right? So when,
Right.
being able to phrase and really figure out from the start what's in it for that person and frame the way that you're presenting this stuff.
Yeah.
And then kind of, it's like there's always a tactic to how you're presenting something.
Yeah.
Those strategy pieces helped me be more courageous when I was having discussions. And then sometimes you just swing and completely miss.
And it happens. It totally happens. And that's
Yeah,
life. And you can't let that stuff deter you or keep you from doing the things that you love doing. Listen,
right.
the point is though, is at the end of the day, it's like you tried, you did something. It doesn't always mean everybody's gonna love it or like what you're doing, or it's going to be the big win. But you know what? The fact that you did it, and then that's when you just got to dust yourself off and go, all right, and go, well, what
Oh, yeah.
was the lesson that I learned from this experience then? Like, did I learn something? Was there one thing, like 1% of something that I learned from this entire experience? And if it's, hey, how to overcome rejection or objection or that somebody not liking my work, like, okay, you just learned that lesson for the first time. Great. You know what? It's not going to be the last time, but good. I'm glad you experienced it. Now you know how to process it better.
Yes. Yeah. I think the processing, and I've always been one to like show all of my feelings. Like, very hard
Yeah.
to not hide what I'm feeling, but I've had to work on that quite a bit.
Yeah. It takes a lot of practice. It's not
It
something
takes a
that
lot.
happens overnight.
But what's so interesting though, and that's why I'm so grateful for the change that's been occurring,
Yeah.
because everybody's like, you got to bring your authentic self to work. We want you. We really want you. And I'm like, are you sure you really want the real me? But okay. And I think you learn, it's been nice because I've been able to, let my hair down a little bit more, be a little bit more of the unique me in my financial setting. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So I feel like that it's changed in that space, and I'm really happy to be a part of that movement where we're seeing diversity of thought and bringing your authentic self and all these different things. And it's a much better space. It feels really good to be creative right now.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we're like in this great, I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know if it's necessarily a renaissance, because it's not like that it ever went away. But I feel like I feel like you were saying, I think there's a much more flexibility. There's a lot more acceptance to it, and the embracing of creativity in all aspects of business and what people bring to the table, and being much more open-minded, especially from a leadership perspective, as to where ideas can come from and how to get the most out of somebody by really, instead of saying, no, that's against policy, or you're not in, that's not your title, or any of that. It's more like, well, no, if you've got a good idea, like, I want to hear it. I don't care how silly you think it's going to sound. I don't care. Tell me the idea. Like, I want to see it. Or, hey, I made this. What do you think of this? Oh, wow. Well, geez, thanks for the initiative. Like, that's awesome. Like, you just don't know what's going to inspire something. You just don't. And so I think, right. And when you create a culture and a community that makes that thrive, those, like you said before, that's what makes people successful. That's what makes companies successful. Like, being around that and fostering that energy, that to me is that's a home run for any company.
Yeah. And I think too, the more that we think about even our processes of how we're designing and the way that we're doing it. And so I talk about designing for the cognitive bias, right? Like making sure that you are creating an experience that really is authentic, right? Because people know it's not authentic from a mile away, right? So are you doing a check in your mind of things that are just what Bridget Esposito would like, and it's really what your customer needs at the end of the day, and not just kind of going through the process? And so even the idea of that and all of that's evolving, and the level of diversity and inclusion that's happening, like, it is really strong right now. And I mean it. Like, I'm so excited that I'm a creative in this time right now. And I see Priscilla McGeehan, by the way. She's a rock star. I don't know if anybody knows her. I adore working with Priscilla. She is such an amazing copywriter. And
that's
she's
awesome.
the best. She's the freaking best.
Yeah. So Priscilla's checking in for those not watching. So Priscilla, colleague of Bridget, says, Bridget is a real champion for creativity and inclusion. Always happy to share her knowledge and partner with other creatives. Brilliant session. Well, thank you, Priscilla, so much for joining us today live. And thanks for participating. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Isn't it really late in Ireland? I think she's in Ireland. I think it's really late.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it should be like, I think, what, 5 hours, 6 hours? I can't remember. Ahead in the future. She's in the future.
Yeah.
How's the rest of the day? How does the rest of the day look? No, but I love this discussion. I feel like you and I could go on and on and on about this discussion for a while. So I have a couple more things I'd like to ask before we wrap it up, if that's okay. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, those of you watching live, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them on over and we'll bring them up. And obviously, if you're watching a replay of this and you have any questions, just, DM Bridget directly. All her contact information on LinkedIn and all that's all included in her show notes and video description. So we were talking a bit about this, and I think this is an interesting topic, because you started off sort of in an agency side.
Yeah.
And then now you're saying, you said it, I'm working for a financial company, you're internal, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is that transition like? And you've seen a lot, and, and I know, with Prudential, like, I know there's been a lot of changes internally, culturally. And so, how do you go from that and then, find your way through or navigate through things like we were talking about, like policy, culture, things like that? I mean, you've seen a lot from that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we didn't go back to the whole storyline, but then I left after coaching Division I softball. I went back to the agencies. I was working at Walton Isaacson in the city, a couple other places, and talking about great networks, because you're really good at it. I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was doing that trip to the city, and I was just like, oh
Oh,
This
yeah.
is not what I want to do. I was
That slog.
like, I was like, who's going to hire me when I'm pregnant? Right. Right. Again, now we're at a new time.
Right.
And somebody that I worked with in the past was like, hey, they saw my Facebook post saying, help, I don't want to go to the city anymore. And I found this gig and it was at Prudential Financial. And I was like, oh, this will be like a short thing. And it was different going from, you know, the external agency to the internal agency and then in-house. But I got to tell you, like I got there and I was like, this is nice. I like
Right.
this because there was the sense of family was there, but there was so much more from more opportunities for me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is there was areas of opportunity to learn in different spaces and get education in spaces that I didn't have externally at these agency space because it's such a large company, right?
Right.
So I was taking courses on leadership and I was taking courses on things that interest me and joining business resource groups, which were wonderful. And then the agency internally just started building and building and building, and we are all in separate places. And then we came together, and now I work in a group with like 70 of us as creatives, like in-house.
Wow.
Like, it's so nice. Like it's awesome, and they're all really, really talented. And I think they you know, everybody's enjoying that in-house life, right? It's great.
Yeah.
It definitely becoming more corporate, as I always say, like
Right.
corporatized, was definitely a jump for me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when I first got to Peru, some might not have said I was very polished. That's okay. I wasn't. Some. Yes, definitely would say. Like John Renz is not on this call. So I wasn't as polished, right, of how I handled things, the how that I approach different spaces. And I think over time, like I realized that I just wanted to be a better partner and that it worked a little bit differently, but I accepted the processes. And then the best part is that they allowed me in the door to help change those processes or processes. Processes or processes?
I think it depends. I always say processes.
I feel like processes sounds more fancy.
Processes sounds fancy. It sounds corporate.
Yeah, it's where someone helped with the processes and then becoming a part of that. And again, getting the seat at the table and saying, there's a better way to do this. Like, have we looked at this? And we should approach it this way. And so a lot of my job kind of shifted into that space of leading and working with processes along with guiding the creative and working on the stuff like that too. It definitely was a shift, but it was a shift for John Renz. There he is.
John Renz, check it in, ladies and gentlemen. No one ever said Bridget was not polished, at least not to my face.
Yeah, they might have sent me some emails. I don't know. Might have been HR. I don't know. It's fine. It all worked out. No, but it was definitely a change. And I think what's great though is that there was also room to grow. So, you know, John and I started at Prudential the same exact time. And we started out in one business. And then we kept growing and growing, and we were able to show the value of what good creative can really do. And it just kept expanding. And now we're this larger group working on all different assets and aspects of the business. And it's wonderful. I mean, enterprise, global, the whole nine. And I think that's the opportunities of being in-house. Again, once you kind of learn what's going on, but then you really work on the processes, you work on the people, you work on what's happening there, and you develop this space where everybody feels great. And then, by the way, there's also access to all these things like these learnings, these HR, like psychological safety and all these spaces of helping your team feel more comfortable. And we could go on about psychological safety for a while, but I know that this is a shorter.
That'll be part two.
Part two,
psychological safety.
Yeah. So I think that was the bigger difference was there were more processes, but then when we were able to be a part of it, it made a difference and you were able to sculpt it to a good space.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what, the way you're describing it, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that way. And, you know, sort of how, you know, for you, at least, you know, the evolution and the transition. But when you know, as you laid it out, I mean, it sounds very like, you know, gradual and just the way it should go, you know?
Yeah. And I had a lot of different leaders too, because we didn't always report into another creative. We reported into a communications leader and a strategy person, and learned a lot from them. Right. I learned a lot from the way that they did things differently than the creatives. And now we're back to reporting into a global creative director, Joe Volpicelli, who's also super talented. So it's great. It's like a lot of different experiences there.
That's awesome. And John checking back in again. In all seriousness, Bridget is a case study on the importance of being authentic. Bring your true self, talents, passions to the table, and you will soar.
I paid him to say that, guys, just
I'm
so
gonna
you
say,
know. No, John, you're the best. Honestly, he's a like.
yeah,
It helps when you have such an amazing team, right? Like I
of
said
course.
before, the John is my partner in crime,
Hmm.
and I kid you not, like we hold each other accountable. We hold each other up. We make sure that we're working together, and I think that's the crux of a really good relationship from a creative partner, right? So
Absolutely. I mean,
easy to do that when you have
collaboration is key.
it.
Collaboration is key. It really is. When you can't there's no I in team, but I mean honestly, I mean but there is, but you do. I mean you all lean on each other.
Yeah,
You have your leaders, and leaders lead by example, and but just because there shouldn't be walls between leaders and teammates. It shouldn't
right.
exist.
Nope.
you know
Nope.
and I think that style of collaboration builds a great culture, which therefore you're all unified for doing one thing, one goal, one vision all together. And that's
Absolutely.
once again, that's where great things happen. That's what you want, whether you're in a corporation like yourself, or a smaller agency, or hey, if you're a solopreneur but you have like the people you work with, like that's collaboration. Like work with the people that are in your influence, your circle of influence, your sphere, like whatever you want to call it. Like work with the people in your network, leverage your network to
Yeah.
do the collaboration, to do the things that you love doing. Don't look at it as competition, or
No.
whatever else you want to call it. Like, don't let ego get in your way on these things. It really, and I think that more than ever, if we're going to talk about things that have changed, over the last couple of years, is I think the acceptance once again of the flexibility of the collaboration style, and working with more and more people, especially, when having been away from it, and then having to find new ways to collaborate, being on opposite sides of the country or
Yeah.
globally, it's forced everybody to think differently in what collaboration means and how to do it. And I think that
Absolutely.
that's been a very cool positive to come out of, what's been going on.
I am really curious to see how the hybrid situation plays out, and also how the people that are being forced to go back to work 5 days a week, how that plays out.
Yeah,
I'm really curious because, in all honesty, since we're being honest here,
we're
I
being
don't
honest.
ever want to go back to the office for the rest of the day of my life. I mean, every now and then to go hang out with John and Priscilla and things, and when I need to, but we've literally proven that we can work from home successfully. And I know, like
Right.
our team, we've had so much success over the past 2 years, and we've proven that we can do this in this space because people use technology a lot as excuse. So they'll use like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but there are things that will help you. And if you
Yes.
tear it down, all it is communication. That's
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's what we're doing right now. It's talking. It's like
Right.
you can pick up you can dial into a Teams meeting just as easy as picking up a phone or what have you. And so I think that it'll be interesting. And don't get me wrong, I will end up going back into the office, and I will, and that's
Right. But what you're saying,
it's a nice
is, yeah, I don't need to be in the office 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I
correct.
can work from home. We can get work done. We can still collaborate. The quality of work is there, if not even better.
Right.
And yes, I do want to, and you'll still do some of those things, but there's no need to go in Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 or whatever,
And
to,
there's
to
for
do that.
those, yeah, for those who want to go in, then absolutely, right? Like I get it, do it. That's you. And I think that kind of comes out into being your authentic self. Like what is working for you?
Correct.
What is working for you? How are you successful? I feel like I'm more successful in the past 2 years because I'm able to work life balance a little bit more, right?
Oh my gosh, that is huge,
It's huge.
huge. And
Huge.
that's, ties into mental health, physical. I mean, there's so many, and once again, we could go on and on about this, but I
Yeah.
mean, it is a very interesting topic, and it's very, very relevant because everybody is dealing with this.
Yeah.
Um, Everybody's dealing with this in one way or the other, and they're making their decisions, and it's all about, and that's the thing, I think, working with companies that understand that and respect it and say, yeah, you know what, we don't have to do the way it was. There's this way, and let's do what's best for the company and the people that we work with, our team. Like
Yeah.
let's think about that, and so I think that that's really key, because people will be more productive if they're healthier physically and mentally, and they feel like that they have that balance, and I think that's
Absolutely.
very, very key. So before we split, I want to ask you.
Yeah.
You brought this up too, so I'm like,
Oh
I'm
no.
not letting you go on this one because I was like,
Don't
ooh,
hurt
that's really good. So, what's the worst advice you ever got?
me.
You brought it up, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm definitely asking that one. That's a good one.
And I will preface this by saying everything happens for a reason and it puts you on your life's journey. But
It
I will
always
tell
does.
you I think the worst advice I ever got was I was younger and someone was like, there was two jobs. One was offering me a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was just a really great family based like company I like working for. And the culture was great. And someone was like, you take the money. You always take the money. I was like, okay. And I followed that. And man, I was like, shouldn't have taken the money. It was like, it was such a better space. So I learned that you have to really find the balance between getting the money that you believe that you should be paid
Mm-hmm.
and finding that balance together. Because listen, we're in a great space. You can do that now. The younger me like took the money in that one spot
Right.
and then was afraid to ask for what I thought my value was in the other. And so it's like, I think finding that happy balance is the way to go.
Yeah, I think that is that's a good. I mean, listen, this is what we were talking about earlier. You know, experience is
Yeah.
everything. You got to go through certain things and learn what lessons learned from that. And yeah, I would say that was some pretty bad advice, but it turned. But you got
Let
to
me
go
hear.
through that to find out what you didn't want and what
Right.
doesn't work for you. And knowing your own value too is huge. I talk about
Yeah.
that all the time with people and like knowing your value and much like a little bit of, the self-doubt sets in, all that. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, you are worth this. Like, you are worth it. You gained this experience. You spent the time. You gathered the knowledge. You invested in yourself. You're worth it. And
Absolutely.
there are people out there that will know that you're worth it. And there will people that don't. And those are not the people you want to work with.
Yeah.
Simple.
Absolutely. And I know, this is a whole other topic, but, from a gender pay gap perspective, women have a harder time asking for what they should get. They just, it's a fact. And I know
Yeah.
I talk about it with my friends all the time. Any one of my friends, I can get their ear and say, are you asking for the right amount of money? Did you do the research? Like, what are you looking at? Like, what is the appropriate amount of money that you should be asking for? You can do it. Just, and like,
Yeah.
because it's just often, and sometimes it's funny. You should practice what you preach for sure. But you gotta just do the research, know, and then just ask for it. Because I could have found the best in both worlds probably had I not taken the advice, but then gone back and said,
Right.
I just need a little bit more to be in comparison with what they're offering
Exactly.
at my level, right?
Yeah.
When you learn.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you should absolutely do that. When everybody should just, do that. Like, find out, if you are worth something, go in there and ask for it. Like, you
Yeah.
deserve to do it. And everybody should have an idea of what they're actually worth, and everybody should be able to get what they're worth.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't delay. Everybody out there, do not delay. Find out what you're worth and get it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
End of story. So, wow, this was great. See, look at this. We filled it up, and there's probably 20,000 more things we could talk about today.
Absolutely.
But we'll
This was
save it for
great.
next time. We'll save it for when John Renz comes on the show.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna make so many comments. It's gonna be great.
Oh yeah, so you get to make comments on his when
Yeah.
when he comes on. But that would be awesome. That would be great. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on, Bridget. Thank you.
Yeah.
This was really wonderful to have you on. This was such a great discussion. I had so much fun, and I look forward to doing this again very soon. Any final words before we wrap it up?
I just thank you for having me. This is a blast. I could keep talking to you for hours and hours. And anybody out there listening, make sure that you're having all these kind of conversations with your friends and your other peers and share everything you know. That's all.
There you go. Share it. Absolutely. Do
Share
not
it.
hold it in.
Don't hold
Don't.
in.
Nope. Provide high value content for your community, your network. Do not
Yeah.
keep it inside. That's a key component to today's lesson.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely make sure everybody out there, please connect with Bridget. As I said, her LinkedIn is in the show notes and the video description below. So make sure you connect with her. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to her. And I'm sure she will get back to you with answers as soon as she can. And also, if you're interested in having Bridget come speak to your company, as we were talking about, absolutely make sure you get a hold of her, because that is something that she can do. Or if you want her to speak at your next conference, trade show, whatever it is,
Nice.
Adobe Max is like, you're probably going to be at the next one. I got to come to it. If you're doing it now, I'm coming next time. I want a
I'm
front
so
row
gracious
seat.
that I did it once. I would love to, but man, that was exciting.
I know. I want to get a front row seat if that happens again.
It'll
I'll
be-
get a front row seat no matter where you go. Next time I'm going. I'm coming, and I'm sitting right up front.
Nice. Thanks.
It's happening. It's happening. All right, everyone. Well, thank you all so much for watching live with us today. And thanks to everybody who is going to watch the replay of this. And of course, any of those that will be listening to the audio stream of this later on. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you're watching or listening to the show. And please feel free to share this with anybody in your life, because not only does it help grow the show, but it also helps my guests get their word out as well. So thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. Make sure you should support my sponsor, Win Local. Once again, that code and link are in the show notes below. And if you like the show and you like the interviews, please feel free to head over to my Buy Me a Coffee at C Vaglia. Once again, link is in the bio. And feel free to generously donate to a level that feels comfortable for you. So with that, everybody, thank you again. We will see you next time on another episode of Rocket Live. Remember, always be yourself, always be authentic, and always remember to rock it. See you guys.